up on you mentioned that with the two-member LLC, there was an advantage there. What if it's just a husband and wife who are the members of the LLC? Does that offer that extra protection, or is that going to be just as easy to pierce because their personal assets may be seen as joint?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I don't know. That's one I don't know if we want to include, because what I generally recommend people to do in that case, if you're in a community property state, and we include we list out all the community property states, but if you're in a community property state, usually you want to have somebody who's like not your wife or husband as the second member or as a third member, and give them a real small percentage.
Yeah. So maybe that's just getting too deep for this.
It's kind of getting deep. We do cover it, and I do address that through newsletters and different things. But it is kind of an issue. But and there's all kind of opinion on this, because we really haven't seen any cases where it's stuck.
Sure.
So it's kind of like one of those, we don't really know yet. But what we do say is, if you're in a community property state, you probably want to have just a relative or someone like that have a small interest, maybe 5%.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the answer. And we go through that with folks, and we have articles and all that kind of stuff on this, so that they won't be at a lack for that information, that instruction. But it kind of gets detailed. But it's a hell of a question. It's a real good question, and it's one that we're just kind of waiting to see what happens. But the safe way would be to do it that way.
Okay.
The attorney I just talked to, I wanted, because of the CPA saying that I should have an attorney go over my LLC again, I called the attorney and said, how much is it to go, just look over my LLC, make sure it's formed correctly. And he said, $600-$700. Now, I was like, wow, that's a lot just to look at it. It's already formed. It's already filled out. Everything's done. How much does it generally cost to set up an LLC through an attorney?
Well, it generally would cost about that much. It's going to depend on what the attorney charges. It could range from anywhere from $500-$600 to several $1,000s, as much as $3,500 to $4,000. The thing that is sort of the irksome spot with me is that you don't really get the instruction on how to run the LLC effectively. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get all the forms you need, all the instruction you need. Doesn't mean that you're going to get instruction on how to run the business in a low liability manner. So you end up, if you walk out of there and you only have the thing filed and you have no idea how to run it, really you are going to need a lot more instruction. So I get a lot of people call me and say, what, I saw your materials, they look great, but I already have an LLC set up, I don't think I need it. And I say, that is wrong, because we cover so much way beyond setting up the LLC, because if you haven't gotten much out of this today, the whole point that I want to make is it's not just setting it up. It's everything that you do afterwards. And in that regard, that's why we spend so much time covering all that information. So we detail all of that. And I would say that it would take a great amount of time to go through all this information.
Okay, so just to put this in perspective then, maybe give us an idea of how much you charge per hour as an attorney, and then, if you were to walk somebody through all this instruction that you're talking about, how many hours are we looking at that somebody would be paying for to get that instruction?
Well, that's a great question. Generally between $180 to $200 an hour. And that's why I find this course to be so great, is because for folks that are starting out in business that don't have the time, or really don't have the money to have an attorney walk them through every bit, there's no reason that they should be out there incurring liability, getting into bad business practices, and getting into situations that could harm them. Honestly, it would take me about 35 hours to go through and cover all of this stuff with somebody. That at $200 an hour is quite a lot of money, over $6,000. The other thing is that we don't generally, attorneys generally will charge you extra money for forms. So it may cost you $100 to $150 per each form and that sort of thing. This material covers a great deal of forms. In fact, we include well over 50 forms that you can use in your LLC immediately for a myriad of transactions. They're not fill-in forms like you find. They're usable on Microsoft Word. You can open them up. You can change them, you can edit them, or if you want, you can utilize some of the pre-printed forms, but all of them are available on Microsoft Word. So you have a great deal of instruction, a great deal of information here that we do include in the materials.
So Darius, I have a question. Actually, I mean, recently I had a partnership that we kind of went through a splitting up, and of course I'm doing business really through Internet Business Mastery with with the distinguished Sterling. But we have a situation here. We speak to a lot of solopreneurs on the show, but we're in a situation with our business here where Sterling and I are partners and we're doing business together. So maybe could you speak a little bit to some of the issues that might arise when it comes to going into business with somebody and what you should be aware of?
Well, this is a real important issue. I mean, we talked about liability issues from suits between your business and outside parties like competitors or other people that are in the same industry. We talked about tax issues and saving money in taxes. Of course, we covered reducing liability, which is money in the bank and keep going forward. But one thing that most people don't think about is disputes between individuals in the business. And if you do business on a handshake, you're looking for trouble because you don't have an agreement that is structured that details the obligations and rights of parties. One thing we've done in this material that is just phenomenal is we've gone through and we have spent literally about 4 hours walking through one of the gold standard agreements for a small LLC. And it will detail exactly some of the protections you would want to include in there. For example, how will your company handle trade secrets, customer lists, confidentiality of information? Do you have a non-compete agreement? What happens if, Sterling decides to go to another competitor? Who will take the list? If you don't decide those things first, chances are you may not decide them, or it may be too late when you want to enforce them. So we don't just cover tax issues. We don't just cover getting sued. We cover the mechanics of going into business with other parties. Here's another one that most people don't think about. Let's say I decide to go into business with a guy named John, and we're good friends. We've been friends since college, and I like him. He likes me. We work well together, and we share some common traits, and we have some strengths where others have weaknesses. And let's say that John decides for whatever reason that he's tired of the business, he can't take it anymore, and he decides he wants to sell the business. I plead with John, you know what, don't sell your interest. I want you to stay with me in the business. One day he just says, you know what, I can't take it anymore. He sells it to his Uncle Fred. I have no idea who Uncle Fred is. I don't want to work with him. I don't have any desire to work with a stranger. Plus, the guy doesn't know anything about business, and now I'm a 50-50 partner with this guy. Guess what? The business that was going great now may suffer immensely, or I may just hate it. As a result, what happens? I'm stuck. You see, you have to have certain controls in place to dictate what will happen if somebody wants out of the business. How would they sell their interest to the other party? Is there a buyback right? Is there any type of control there? Another example, let's say that you're in business with an individual who's married. In some states, if the party gets a divorce, and let's say your